kind of was able to look forward. And maybe since he been with him a long time, he was known to have stomach problems. So because of this, he couldn't really drink the water that day because of the bacteria. He told him to take a little bit of what? A little bit of wine. Sometimes we get caught up in this, and we actually call another portion that God is not necessarily against wine, it's about inebriation, but also we need to be an example to our brothers and sisters that, as we know, they're old wives still and some good ones. I know Mother Creedy could probably tell you some things that you can take and mix a little wine to help and to calm the stomach. So this is the same thing that Paul the Apostle is using. He's putting forth wisdom from this point. So look at this also, the difficulty. It's stressful being a leader. All our leaders in here can understand. And if you're not in the very presence of the Lord, you can really have turmoil on the inside. So Paul is saying, Timothy, as you're growing at this until you become more mature, you may need to take a little wine. Notice he said a little, not a whole bunch. Take a little wine. It's interesting to note many of our remedies over the counter have what in it? Alcohol. There's alcohol in it. This was before we had a CVS or a Walgreens. So the wisdom of God goes back to dealing with this. Go ahead and read that second paragraph, please. More properly, Timothy, the purification of contaminated water, the apostles' advice, no longer drink only water, means that Timothy should not drink water to the inclusion of a little wine. Paul advises the use of a little wine for his stomach's sake and his frequent infirmity. This verse is dealing only with the necessity of a little wine. It should never be stretched to condone its excess of use. Amen. Everybody got that? Everybody got that? I want to make sure you got this. It's okay to, you're sick, to take some cough syrup with alcohol in it. But it's wrong to just start drinking cough syrup one after another to get drunk. Okay? So please understand that's what Paul is talking about. And then those final two paragraphs, if you finish it off, please. There is no doubt that it is real wine that is referred to here and not just grape juice. It is doubtful that grape juice even existed at this time, since grape juice is made by pasteurization, a process not yet known. The fact that it was real wine is implied in the expression a little wine. If it were not real wine, then there would be no sense in stipulating that only a little should be used. This verse also sheds light on the subject of divine healing. Although Paul, as an apostle, doubtless had the power to heal all kinds of diseases, yet he did not always use it. Here he justifies the use of medicine in a case of stomach illness. A lot of good points here. A lot of preachers and some place you'll go in, you'll try to justify, say it wasn't real wine. It was. They don't want to deal with how to explain to others that the Bible doesn't teach against wine. It teaches in inebriation and using it incorrectly. But here we see it is talking about a little wine. And then that final thing, I thought that was very applicable to our lives. There's so many doctrines that are out there. God will heal you, and He will. He will. But God can work through natural things that He's actually put on the earth. And our grandmas and great-grandmas and mamas knew that. There's certain things that God has put in the earth to help and assist us in that healing process in us. I believe in divine healing, but I also believe there's certain things you can do. If you've got high blood pressure, God can speak to your heart to stop eating pork, and that'll help you with your blood pressure. Amen? He can speak to you to lower your salt intake, and that'll help your blood pressure. So there are things we can do, and oftentimes we go to God, hey, heal me, heal me. He's putting it back in our ballpark. What are we doing and what are we using that's already on the earth that He's put forth here? And He can give us wisdom in that. So we see this remedy of a little wine for Timothy. Any questions on this? I don't want y'all to go home and get drunk tonight.
I have a question, but in the nursing field, elder tonic was a 94% alcohol, and it's used for appetite stimulant for the elderly. So it's used that way. And also, anemic, people with anemic that can't take iron pills, they tell them to drink a little bit of wine, so many ounces of wine a day, and, of course, to eat the liver and that kind of stuff. But it is used for medical alcohol.
Medicinal, so
Yeah,
very
not
important
to
as
get
we're thinking about that, in that process. Yes, sir.
Company I work for, ships Elder Tonic all over the United States.
Okay.
So if anybody needs some, give me a call.
What is it called?
Elder tonic.
Elder Tonic.
ELDER? Elder tonic. So we see a lot of that medicinal use. Yes, sir. just a little bit. So there's another hand. Yes, sir.
Oftentimes, it's day-to-day dealing with people work on the job and different places. They realize you're sick, they'll ask you about it. Do you take it to church with them? Bible doesn't teach that. It teaches that Jesus was associated with wine, some of the disciples were associated with wine, but they accepted it. It does teach that they accepted it. Drinking too much wine, or drinking some beer, or alcohol,
So as we look at the scripture, we want to divide them rightly, and we want to be a good example. Again, some things that you could do, some things we choose not to do, or we choose not to do those things in public. That God, hey, you can do those things, but we want to be a good example. We don't want our good to be misconstrued in a sense. So we've got some clear doctrinal understanding of this. Notice as we continue on, because it's actually building on a process. There are false teachers that are still in that church that Timothy is going to have to deal with. And someone read that next verse, please.
Some men's sins are clearly evident, deceiving themselves, but those of some men are revealed.
This is key and critical. Some sins you can see. Some people that do this, you can see it. You're like, man, that's a sinner. But there's some other folks that are sinners that is hidden. And you won't see that. You will not see that. But is one sin better than the other sin? No, it's all sin. Just because you can't see what sin is in my life, that doesn't mean that it's not there. It's not existent. So now we've got to deal with, Timothy has to be able to have foresight even to those who look good. And for the most part, even in church, a majority of people look good. That's not what gets you in trouble. It's the other stuff that people don't know about. That's what gets you, because eventually the scriptures are very clear in this, and I've seen it over and over. God is a gracious God. He will give you sometimes years to work out some stuff, to allow him to work it out of you. But if you continue in your way, what's done in the dark is what? It's going to come to the light. Someone read that commentary, please.
In this verse, the apostle seems to go back to the discussion in verse 22, where he had been warning Timothy against the unclean and laying hands on the women. Verses 24 and 25.
Now, as we begin to look at this portion of scriptures, be careful who you get involved with. I've often seen our young people, old people alike, someone is just, oh man, they're so nice and they speak to you and everything, but then there's this devil on the other side. What looks good may not be good. What's it, everything that's silver or shine, not silver, gold, whatever that statement is, we have to have, the scriptures talks about a discernment of what's going on, a discernment of the Spirit, because there's so many things that challenge us in our lives. Even as we look at that whole entire commentary, go ahead and finish that, please.
Some men's sins are clearly evident, but are so obvious that they may be compared to a trumpeter blaring on in front of the man, announcing him to be a sinner, all the way to his judgment. But that is not the case with all. Some men who are sinners are not exposed until sometime today.
This stuff is going to come out. It will eventually come out. A majority of people will know. And it's often it's hard for me, especially doing funerals, and most of the time I'm blessed, but sometimes you get some folks that, you know, everybody knew, and I have a big problem. One of my problems is I don't lie very well. So you have to not talk about that person and talk about something, but everybody knows, and there's that feeling, because at funerals, everybody wants to be nice. You know, if Pam was messed up, nobody wants to say that at a funeral. We want to find the best about her. But oftentimes, if you got to dig a whole bunch to find the best in somebody, a majority of his life was messed up, and everybody knows that. But the flip side of that, go ahead and finish that commentary. Where did she go to? Our reader left. Tabitha, would you finish, please?
Sure. In the first class, or I guess case, we might think of the drunkard who is known as such by the whole community. On the other hand, there is the husband who is carrying on a secret love affair with another woman. The community might not know about this at the time, but oftentimes the whole scandal is revealed at a later date.
Don't we all know that? Don't we all know that? I mean, it's going to come out. But why do y'all continue to do that? Sin is going to come out. It's going to come out. It is. We all know it. If you're a public figure, it's going to come out. Somebody's going to find it, and it's going to. If you're not a public figure, somebody's going to see you somewhere, and it's just going to come out. It may take a long time, but it is going to come out. And Paul gives this extraordinary advice. In essence, don't judge anybody before it's time. Don't lay hands on them quickly, because there could be some underlying things. And I think the church has got in trouble with putting people out quickly. They say that they got a call or a revelation from the Lord, and we just put them forth. And so many people have been embarrassed because we were guilty. We put them out, and they hadn't been tried. That doesn't mean that we don't mess up, but there's a maturity process that comes within our growth. And this is what Paul the Apostle is looking at. Someone read that next verse, please. Yes. Laying hands on the last time we talked about, saying that, okay, the ministry that God has put in your heart, it's okay for you to go forth in that. Okay? Discernment is being able to see something that you can't not necessarily see with your eyes. You just have you have walked in a room and you sensed that something was going on that you couldn't see. All right, so that's discernment. Judgment, you can actually judge, but the problem is in the judgment you got to make sure that you have all parts. So judgment is seeing pieces and putting them together. And sometimes we misjudge because we don't have all the pieces. We actually can see. Accident occurred, such and such hit, but when the cops get there, they look at, okay, where are the skid marks? Who's at fault? So that's that judgment process. So discernment, what you can't see, judgment, what you can see, but we got to get all the parts. Any other questions? All right, so let me read the next verse, please.
Likewise, the good works of some are clearly evident, and those that are otherwise cannot be hidden.
The good works that people do, you can't hide that. You don't have to blow a trumpet. You don't have to tell everybody about it. It's going to come out. Your good works will follow you. Deacon Kelly, go ahead and read that commentary.
It is somewhat similar in the case of good people. Some obviously seem to be good at once. Others are more retiring and modest, and it is only in the passing of time that their actions goodness becomes common. Even if we cannot see good, there may be some who become the right way. The lesson to draw from all this is that we should not judge on first appointment, but rather allow time for the character to show itself.
If you get anything out of these few scriptures that we've dealt with, that last part, we should not judge a person on what? First appointment, but rather allow time for true character to show itself. I wish I could put this in all our young people, all our middle age, all our old people. Don't, you okay? Don't judge anything before it's time. Don't judge anything before it's time. It's very important also, even with churches. I'm okay with people sitting in Ebenezer for a little bit of time and looking at our leaders and looking at me and doing research on me, because that shows them, hey, they can commit to something that they know all the ins and outs. If we're afraid for people to examine our lives, we got a problem anyway. If we're afraid of people looking at us, I don't like to even go in when someone's trying to sell me something. You know, if they're trying to do a quick thing on me, and I'm going to back off of that, because I want to make sure I understand all the processes, because usually quick is not better. If somebody just trying to come into your life and take over, that's not better. You need to find out their background. Do some background checks. My kids already know. If they bring somebody in the house, first of all, I don't know if they just hang around somebody. Hopefully I don't know. They'll have a discernment of spirit with that. And if I think he's even trying to go somewhere, I'm going to go ahead on my computer and do a little background check on them, their mama, and their daddy. And just kind of see what we got to deal with. Because I counsel folks, and I understand your background affects your decision. I'm not saying if you had a bad background that you can't be within the family, but we can deal with that up front. We don't have to pretend. And I think some people in their lives, they pretend too much. That's why we take our time. Steve. Walking in relationship, that's important. Getting to know someone. Yes, ma'am.
Section B. How do you separate yourself? You said you should not judge a person on the first appearance. But it was the concern when you feel inside that you know that person isn't right. How do you still not judge them or whatever? I mean,
At this point, you have a first acquaintance and you go, something's in you like, that ain't right. And you don't want to judge them. You don't have to judge them. You just don't have to hang out, or you do a background check on them. You ask other people, how's that person? You know, you don't have to say what you're feeling, but you can find out about them without having to spend time, because there's always someone else. I think blind dating can be a terrible thing. You know, you're going to go out with somebody that you don't even know. You don't know the background or anything of that sort. Of course, you can go with a recommendation of somebody. But you still need to know who you're going to hang out with, who you're spending time with, because that person can drastically affect your life. Drastically affect if you don't understand who they are and their personality. Yes, sir. Amen. Any other questions? Good questions. Discernment, judging, being led of the Lord. Notice as we get to the next section, this is can be a tough section. I just kind of deal with it because it's in the scripture. Slavery, especially as we've just come out of Black History Month, and so many people have gotten caught up in this. And I don't want to say slavery is not over. In essence, if you work, somebody has bought a portion of your life, and you can call it whatever you want to call it, but they bought a portion of you. And this slavery here, these people that were in servanthood, they weren't paid, or at least they weren't paid in physical checks. They were paid by room and board. So we want to look at this from a level point. And the Bible doesn't say slavery is good, but the Bible does say if you're in slavery, there's a way you should live. The Bible sees slavery as a job. And so you're going to have to draw back as we go in this section from your preconceptions and go, what if I was a slave? What if I was in that time with a master that was over me, and that's what I did? How would I act? Everybody in here is not going to be, picketing, we're going to get out of slavery. That wasn't the attitude at that point. A lot of times people were, at least at this time, they were born into slavery. Your mom was a slave, your dad was a slave, so you were going to be a slave, and all your kids were going to be a slave. It was a way of life. They weren't thinking about there's a different way to do this thing. So Paul has to speak by revelation to the Lord to these slaves. How do you live in that situation? And that's what we're going to be dealing with tonight. Someone go ahead and read 1 Timothy chapter 6. This is the introduction part, those first few paragraphs.
The history of the early church reveals that Christian slaves generally commanded a higher price on the slave market than unbelievers. If a master knew that a certain slave on the auction block was a Christian, he would generally be willing to pay more for that slave, since he knew that the slave would serve him faithfully and well. This is high tribute to the Christian faith. Go ahead, continue that whole section. This verse reminds us that no matter how low a person's position may be on the social scale, yet he has every opportunity for witnessing for Christ and bringing glory to his name. It has often been pointed out that the institution of slavery is not openly condemned in the New Testament. However, as the teaching of Christianity has spread, the abuses of slavery have been abolished. Every true believer should realize that he is a bond slave of Jesus Christ. He's been bought with a price. He no longer belongs to himself. Jesus Christ owns him, spirit, soul, and body, and deserves the very best he has.
I think in order to understand this in our lives, we really have to be comfortable with the fact that if you're a Christian, you're a slave to Christ. And he brings this forth, and this was an uncomfortable concept when I first started reading the scripture. I thought, a slave? Because a slave denotes that we're not ourselves. There's someone that controls us. And if we would be honest with ourselves here, we don't want anybody to control us. We want to be free, and we lie to ourselves that we're so free. But all of us in here have somebody over us. Amen. I know some people are like, I ain't got nobody. I can do what I want to do. I'm proud. No, you got to answer to somebody. If you don't pay taxes, keep not paying taxes. Keep not paying taxes. You're going to answer somebody. If you got a car and you speed, keep on speeding. Keep on speeding, and one day there's somebody going to have a little blue light on there, and they're going to come up behind you. You're going to have to make a decision. And you go, you know what, I ain't stopping. I ain't going to stop for nobody. I can do what this is my car. I can drive whatever speed I want to. Keep on. Go ahead. You go ahead and I'll visit you at the jailhouse, and I'll pray with you, and you go into jail, and I'll write you letters, once a month, and you'll find out you had to listen to somebody. We all, if we were honest with ourselves, are in subjection to someone else. And this is the concept we must get. I tell my kids, and I realized in my life, I wanted to get into the military and go out, and that was crazy. I went to the military, and I was really a slave. People was in control of me, and I understand you never get to the point that you control yourself. There's always someone over you, and it should be Jesus the Christ. And that's how you can deal with other people. So as we go into this section, I want you to keep that mindset, because we're going to deal with some tough doctrinal issues here. Yes, sir.
Station of life, whatever station of life we're in, whether we're rich, whether we're poor, whether we're a slave, whether we're a slave owner, it gives us what we need to make it from this life to the next life. No matter what station we're in, rich, poor, sick, healthy, whatever, it gives us what we need to make out of this life as the eternal life. And that's to know that no matter where you born at or where you come from or whatever, you got the same opportunity. Everybody has the same opportunity to make it from this life to gain eternal life.
There's no excuses. No matter where you are in life, there's no excuses. I often ask young people, like, what do you want to be? You know, what do you, and nobody tells me, you know what, I just want to, I'm going to pick up trash, you know, I'm a sanitary worker. Nobody wants to do that. Everybody wants to be a leader, but the problem with that, if everybody's a leader, you can't have all chiefs and no Indian. You just can't. Our world does not work out like that. And I'm so happy about the gospel because it deals with those who are in charge and it deals with those who aren't in charge. And we all have a responsibility to the Lord. And this is what this section is going to talk about. Yes, sir.
They did not see those happy days with their children. So God takes care of them. Sometimes we go through, but it's not the end of life. We always have a plan for
it. Even now, as we're talking about slaves, before we even got to the section, you already have a definition of a slave. And I guess we talked about that. What's a slave? All right. D. Kelly says someone who is owned by someone else. But what are the pictures that come to your mind? Why is it such an issue? All right. You see black people. What else do you see when we say slave? That person was a slave. What do you see? You see bondage. What else? Don't have freedom. A lot of negative connotation come off of slavery, but it wasn't like that for everybody. It wasn't like that for everybody. The Old Testament talks about people that were born into slavery, and it told the masters, and we're going to talk about this, how to take care of their slaves. So this whole process, we have to change our mindset, and I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying a lot of the negative things that we have in our minds may not be exactly what was going on in this section of the scriptures here. So let's jump in. Someone read that first part, please.
Let the bondservants as are under the yoke count their own masters worthy of all honor, so that the name of God and doctrine of God.
Well, this is tough. And the scriptures use bondservant. It's just a nice word for slave, because it brings so much negative connotation with slavery. But it says, let as many bondservants of slaves that are under what? The yoke. You need to describe that. What is a yoke? It's actually put on a beast, all right, an ox. And what the yoke, this is a symbol here under the yoke controls the ox, whichever way. So if you were a slave, you were controlled by your master. He would tell you what to do. Okay? So this whole process under the yoke, count their own masters worthy of what? Wow, you're a slave, and the scriptures, Paul speaks to Timothy, to those people in the situation. He says, give honor to your master. That is tough. Give honor to that person that is over you. And then look at that second part. So that the name of God and his doctrine may not be what? So why do you act this way? What's the key? What's the scripture saying? Why do I give honor to my master if I was a Christian? So that God is exalted. So that God is working out the situation. And we've got to be careful, because I've already made some correlations that even our bosses, how many of us have talked about our managers, talked about those who are in charge, and didn't give them honor? And you know what? What you're causing is that now God has to look at your life, and judgment starts in your life because you're judging someone else. But God has already told us as Christians, we shouldn't have to worry about that. We should give them honor and move on. And the problem when we start talking about someone, most of the time we don't do anything. Amen? We just talk, we get frustrated. You know, I don't like that person. Did you see what they did? But we never confront them. We never say anything to them. We just are upset with them. And this is not giving them honor for that position that God allows. And I think so many times in our life, we say God is in charge, but we really don't believe it. We don't believe that because we try to work out so many things in our life. If God is in charge, is He not in charge of those who are over us too? Did God know the situation that we were in? I'm telling you, we can trust the Lord to work out things. And I think we stay in our situation so long because we don't trust God. We're trying to work it out within our own self. And it's going to talk more about that as we get into the commentary. Yes, sir.
The words speak about obeying how wrong and if they mistreat us, then revenge is the Lord anyway. And I do know that if you own slaves, you're not supposed to turn away from the So you're supposed to let them have something. I know how far we were going to situation. I don't like to do to free, but they gave me some land and cheap on my great grandfather's side. But I guess everybody didn't come into all that.
Right. This whole process is about Christian being in subjection to someone that's over there. Yes, sir.
And it's a tough issue. I mean, it's a tough issue. It really is because, we're over on the other side now. But if we were in the middle of slavery, and, we watch someone take our daughters and real children from them and all of that, it wouldn't be, we gonna praise God and everything, but it just, it ain't easy. You got children. And if someone took them against their will, that's tough. You got to really be close to God, and you got to pray hard for God to get you past that thing that you don't sin and kill somebody or do something that you don't want to do. So, it's tough. It's a tough issue. It really is.
And Deacon Kelly brings out a point. But even him talking, he's talking from the viewpoint of being free.
Right.
Try to imagine this, that you never knew freedom. And it's hard to even imagine that. That's how I deal with it. You grew up, and that's the way it was. You didn't have any thought pattern to even get out of the system. All you knew was slavery. All you knew was your sister at a certain time was going to be taken away and be put in another home. And that's just the way it was. And this is these people at this point. So they're getting saved. They're coming to the knowledge of the truth. God just doesn't go, okay, there's an option of being free per se and how to change your life. No, He works with where we are. He worked in the situation. And that's good news for us. Because aren't you glad that when we came to the Lord, He just didn't require us to all of a sudden to walk perfectly? But no, He changed our heart, and He works where we are to get us out of the situation. But we've got to start somewhere, and this is what the scriptures are talking about. Yes, ma'am.
It's interesting that we're talking about this today because as I was coming to church, I ran across a Facebook post about human trafficking and how slavery still exists. For those people, do these scriptures still apply to them, or they're in a really terrible situation? As I was sitting there reading all of this about, these girls are 12 and 14 years old, and they're sold literally into this slavery, this sex life. How can they follow Christ and be in that type of situation?
That's the good news. And I'm not even going to attempt to speak from that level. I do want to say all slavery wasn't like that. I do want to say, but I want to look at the alternative. If a girl was in that situation, she couldn't get out at that point. What options does she have? She has an option to fight, which is going to make it worse for her. But if she gets saved, then that's where prayer and saying, God, I don't want to be in this situation. You need to take me out. But it's tough. And a lot of times we try to make excuses for being a Christian. We're still a Christian. We're still supposed to love. And when we love, God works things out. But yeah, that's a tough situation. But someone read that commentary as we get a little deeper into it.
Find that the slaves are now bought for, they are spoken of as bond servants who are under the yoke. Under the yoke of slavery. The apostle Paul speaks to slaves who are unsaved masters. The slave in such a case act insolently towards their masters. Should they rebel and run away? Should they do as good as possible? On the contrary, they should count their own masters worthy of all honor. This means they should give in due respect, work obediently, and faithfully, and in general seek to be a help rather than a great Moses was biblical service and got testimony to Christ was about. When the Christian slave was at rule or obey, when the master was blaspheming the name of God in the Christian faith. He was a glue that believers were working a lot.
Now this is key. It's not really confronting tablet issue or sin someone's born into or someone's put into the trafficking, a sexual thing. It's not. It's just saying this person was under a master and his job was to work for the master. The master is not necessarily asking to do anything bad, just his job as a slave per se. So at this point, it's saying because I'm a slave, do I, put hindrances forth, not do it? No. It's saying as you're a Christian, you work hard. You do your job better because you want to be an example of who?
Christ.
Of Christ. You want to be an example of Christ. Again, this is not just talking about the pictures that we have in our mind of slavery, but even on our jobs. Even the things that we do in life, that we're in subjection to someone else, we all have someone over us. And as we work unto the Lord. And all of us experience this. The boss man and the manager, when he wasn't around in the office, you kind of said, you get your work done, but you just kind of see you texting and everything like that. But when the manager comes, all of a sudden, what do? Y'all know what y'all do. Oh, you pushing papers and everything like that. Well, the real thing, the scriptures say that we should have worked like that all the time. Even when the master or those in charge weren't there, because we're working before God. And actually, that's hypocritical, and that's a tough one, but that's being a Christian. Yes, ma'am.
Just as you're reading the scriptures, it makes me think about Joseph, who was just set in prison as a slave. And if he hadn't been respectful and always looking out for his master's interest, the things that happened to him, his promotion, would have never happened. But he's a good example of a good slave.
Amen. Very good point with Joseph. There was another hand on that. Deaconess.
We sometimes as slaves have to do things we don't want to do. And I tell you, it looks unfair sometimes, but be for God, He has a plan for us.
Amen. Wendy.
Says, everything you do it as unto the Lord. And I know when I cleaned the church, there were many weeks when I didn't feel it. I just didn't, tired or whatnot. And just being honest, there were just days that there's some things you like to pass over. But I would always think about the scripture that says everything you do. And even now, I have this thing about there are certain things that I think, somebody knew I was so fanatical about this and think I was crazy, but there's just something inside of me that and I know it's just the Spirit of God that keeps reminding me that even the little things, such as the shopping cart, instead of rolling it over on the side, taking it back and putting where it goes, there are just some things that everything you do. So I believe that includes even the little things. Because somebody's always watching.
You ever walk through a parking lot and there was some trash right in your path? Right in your path. You just happen to, come to yourself, maybe a bottle right in there, and this little still small voice. Speak this to the real Christians. If you ain't a real Christian, you ain't never experienced this, don't worry about it. But there's a little small voice, now somebody's gonna be mad at me. You say I wanna. This little small voice speaks to you and says, pick it up. And then there's this battle for like seconds that go on in your mind. I ain't throw it there, why am I gonna pick it up? And all of these things, it comes to that same point. If God is in charge, then there's sometimes we do things, a lot of times, that we don't want to do, but we know it's the right thing to do. Yes, ma'am.
I had an experience when I go shopping and I'm looking at clothes on the rack. Look like every time I go to a rack, that clothes laying on the floor. I look at clothes up, I hadn't back up. So that's what I was looking at the tops on the rack and all these different racks. I went to the clothes laying on the floor. So I kept putting them clothes, put them on the rack. So I came to another rack, clothes laying on the floor, and I said, Lord, have I not picked up enough of these
I think the Lord said, you need to leave the store. That's what he said. Go home. or get a job there, one of the two. Any other comments or questions? All right, someone read that next verse, please.
And those who have believing masters, let them not despise them because they are brethren, but rather serve them because those who are benefited are believers and beloved. Teach and exhort these.
Go ahead and read the commentary, please.
This verse deals with slaves who have believing masters. Doubtless there would be a very great temptation for such slaves to despise their masters. It is not at all unlikely that when the local church met together on Lord's Day evening for the breaking of bread, there would be Christian masters and Christian slaves seated around the table, all brethren in Christ. But the slaves were not, on this account, to think that the social distinctions of life were thereby abolished. Just because a master was a Christian did not mean that the slave did not owe him honor and service. The fact that the master was both a believer and a beloved brother should influence the slave to serve him faithfully.
This is tough because it's hard for us to imagine, but if we were in that slavery point, we had a master who got saved. The scriptures doesn't teach that he had to let him go. The master had to treat a slave right, and the slave was supposed to give respect to the master, and life went on. And that's tough for us because we have in our thought pattern what's right and what's wrong. And God says what's right is being a Christian and doing the right thing in whatever situation you find yourself in. And here in the scriptures we have a wonderful example of this relationship. And all of us have to deal with this on a daily basis, whether you're a child living in your parents' household, or again, you're a worker on a job, or just going through life and being subject to the laws of the land. We all deal with this in one respect, and God is looking at us and how we act. He's looking and hearing what we say, and we're going to be judged accordingly. We're going to have to stand before the Lord for everything we do. And I found out if you're a hard worker, God will elevate you. God will open up doors for you. And those lazy ones, you're still going to be lazy. And you're never going to you're going to complain about, man, I need more money. But because of your laziness, that's what keeps you down. And God can't really elevate you. And there's sometimes that God will allow you to be in a lowly situation, and He'll still provide. He'll provide for all your needs. You've always been under someone, but you do it faithfully. And the one that's over you is struggling. But you are supplied. Your needs are supplied. That's the God that we serve. Yes, sir.
So you have to be very careful when you work and not mistreat it. They learn different things, how to stop and go and right down, because of you just being the master. So God holds responsible for His troops and groups too. They're on the slave too. We didn't have to obey. Because they kind of like even the ox carries a big yoke on the shoulder. And sometimes he said, well, they climb so heavy so they get down on the knees and try to pull to satisfy the night. So that's how we have to be very careful on how we treat them. I guess that's why a lot of times they have to call what we're not supposed to make sure y'all need all of it.
Think about our lives. I want to make sure we got this process down, this slavery being under someone. Think about how you would treat someone who is in subjection to you. How would you want to be treated? How would you want to be treated? How do we justify someone telling us on our job what to do? How do you justify it? Your boss tells you to do that, and you don't want to do it. Deacon Kelly just, and that's a good transition because we're going to talk about money. Deacon Kelly said it's just about money. That's your boss. They're going to pay you money, so you do what they're going to say. Yes, sir.
Me personally, my supervisor does know Christ. He tells me, I won't tell you to do anything that I want for myself. And I've witnessed this. We work side by side on the same job. Of course, his salary is way more than mine is, but he lowers himself to where I am so he can understand what I have to go through.
Okay, all right. So you're still under him, but he understands what you're doing, and that way he treats you better, but you still have to do
And
what he tells you.
likewise, I don't say, well, I'm gonna walk away and let him do the work, kind of, say, well, so he see how I feel, I'm not gonna walk away, I'm gonna respect them, if we put out to see him do it.
Okay, all right, respect level. Anybody else? Yes.
Well, you got that on the sense as well, but then when you're working with the people, like Greg said, you're elevated, not to misuse them in a way, but you got to go between the ones who work at one level, and then you have to report to the people who are working up at the higher level. So you're like in the middle. So in Greg's defense, I would say, like, I wouldn't put myself in a situation and tell my people to do something that I wouldn't be willing to go in there with my shoulders and get down and do what I need to do with you guys. But then, when I would leave there and have to report back to the people, our bosses, then I would be able to still sit down and, say, okay, well, this is what works for these people here. And this is what will work for me for these people here. Then I'll have to, bring it, they'll have to get to me, I'll have to take it to them, and everybody would be on one accord. But you still have that balance,
Right. And Wilma brings out this struggle, and I think a majority of you all deal with this. Boundaries. What is boundaries? If I'm your boss and I pay your check, and I'm not going against your humanity per se, and I tell you to pick up a piece of paper, you got a choice. You pick up the paper, or you get fired. And a lot of times we struggle with that. Man, I want Christian manners. I want people to treat me nice and like Greg said, are willing to get down with me. But there's a trend that's happening. And I want you to know, because all of you want your little girls, your little babies, and your little boys to grow up and get a good job right after college and go right into a business and start working. But what they're doing now, they're using our young girls and young men, they get college degrees, and they're putting them in a job as managers over folks that have been there for 30 years. That person, our young daughters and young boys, they have never really done any of that. They're just trained in managing per se, but they've never been there. They don't know how to put the product together. And they're telling those people 30 years that have been working there, you need to do this. And the 30-year person is like, we ain't never did it that way. You've never, and there's a struggle. How do we deal with that? And this is what this slavery process is talking about. We have a sense here, especially in the United States, of what's right and wrong. We have a big sense of what's right and wrong. And if we don't get our way, we stick our lip out and we cause problems. And that's why we got unions a lot of times. And I'm not against unions per se, but unions can be a good thing. But when it causes folks to be lazy, there should be some amens in the house. There's a problem with that. Because inherently in us, if you're not saved, and even those who are saved, we fight against our flesh, and we want to get by with as less as possible, right? Oh, real quiet. Don't you want to get paid a whole bunch and do a little? I'm going to say that again, because y'all lying, and all we going to pray after this is over. Don't you want to get paid a whole bunch, if possible, get paid as much as you can, and do as little work as possible? I think a lot of us want that, and we struggle with that. But as a Christian, the process is different. We're supposed to work hard, and God provides for our needs. Yes, sir.
But Pastor, only the part about we being subjected to, everyone is subjected to someone, is an authority. These people that are in this authority level up here, the major companies, executives of these people, their concept of thinking, I'm just, like you were talking earlier, I just wish they were all Christians. And then we wouldn't have this problem. It would be a great thing because humanity as a whole, people wouldn't be looking at each other the way they are now. And the struggle that you just went through, the illustration, if it started up here, we wouldn't have the problem. The problem is going up and trying to get to the next level and trying to have some input as where you can have your authority and then you can just pass your authority or make a statement or put rules and regulations into effect that would help people and not hinder or hurt people. Like the new female CEO or something that made a change about people working at home. And people got upset about it. But that was her decision to make because she felt like that people would be more productive working, in the environment, everybody together. But the thing is,
the one point is that I just wish it was more Christian, and we wouldn't have this problem, because it's there and it's going to be there until Christ comes back.
And the realization we're not going to have more Christians.
Right.
So those who are in subjection to others, we got to live a life. And I think that's the struggle for Christians. We got to live a life. There was a hand, Eddie, and then I got something in the back.
What about respectability? You know, I was thinking about the early or the late 60s when I went to boarding school. And, you know, when you went in town, you couldn't look a white person in the face. You had to look down. So I had to adapt to that. Me coming from New York, it was like a whole, you know, change. But my pops was saying, yo, you just got to adapt. And, you know, don't say nothing to them people. So I just felt like, you know, that was like disrespectful. And in a way, it's like, you know, staying in that slave mentality, you know, looking down. So when I came back at the Parliament, that too. So I guess I'm saying, where does your respectability start?
You have to be saved. When you're saved, your respect comes from the Lord. All right? Your respect is put inside you to the Lord, and He guides you in the steps to take. A lot of times we say we're saved, but we don't want to show love. God has always told us to show love, even to those who mistreat. He told us to show love. And that's a tough concept. That's a tough concept. But isn't that what makes us different? I mean, isn't that, anybody can treat someone good that does good to them. But when you can treat someone that does bad to you and still do good, it's hard. It's hard for someone who's treating you bad and you treat them good, for them to continue to treat you bad. It is tough. Then you got the anointing that's working. It's just tough. It's tough. Yes, you're right. You're right. There was a hand in the back. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to speak about being a younger person who went to college and had to have someone older than me, my mom's age, as my teacher assistant. And that was an easier task for me than others because my parents taught me to always respect elders. Even though her position was not equal to mine in the world view, you have to listen to what older people or people in general have to offer you. And so being brought up in that way to respect people, regardless of their station, regardless of the situation, whether they're custodians or whatever, that goes a long way. And as parents, we have to teach our children who are sometimes spoiled because they have more than what we had and they're going to college. We have to still teach them that respect level before they get in positions like that and talk to people any kind of way and do anything to people.
So you were a good Christian master. That's what you were. I
wasn't a master.
Did you make more money than she did?
I did.
Were you in charge of her?
Yes.
Did you tell her what to do?
In a nice way. Yes.
You were her master. And that's the issue. We have a hard time saying what we are. You were in control of her when she was at your job. That's why they paid you the big bucks. To guide her. If you were blessed that she was a nice lady and she did the right thing. But if she didn't do the right thing, you either tell her what to do or you fire. She does it or she doesn't. And a lot of times we try to make it nice because we have this thing of respect and I want to love people, and we should. But there is a relationship on our jobs, there's a relationship in our life, and this is what the scriptures deal with. It's reality. And that's where we live, day in and day out. Reality. Sometimes we don't want to live there, but it's reality. We're all subject to someone.
But she had an easier time doing what I asked her to do because there was a mutual respect.
Because you were a Christian master.
Because if I went in there in a different way, she might not have received it in that way.
Thank you for being a Christian master. and Pam says, being a Christian, she asks, would you do this? And that's nice. That is so sweet. But the reality of it, you're going to do this or not do this. So whether I ask you or not, I can do this in a nice way. That's just a way that you deal with that. But that's because Christ is in us. We work that out. Yes?
There is one thing I had heard you say. When you are in that particular position and you come to me to tell me that I have anointing as Johnny to tell somebody to train somebody else, and you know that Deacon OJ has been here longer than Brother Johnny, and you want me to tell Johnny, you know, to train him. It's crazy, but like I said, this is what our children are coming into, where they're coming into spots where they're coming into the spots, but then the people that's been there 30 years got trained.
I knew y'all had some stuff. That's why I stayed there a little bit. It's struggle, day-to-day struggle.
And that is, you sure enough got to rely on the Lord when it comes to it.
You got to be saved. This is stuff, what we just talked about in these scriptures, people are dealing with on a daily basis. We just don't want to think it like that because we ain't no slaves. I'm telling you, that's fighting words. But we are. We are. And some of us have put ourselves deeper into slavery by debt. And you fighting mortgage companies and everybody else. You did it. You did it. And they're controlling your life. Some of you get stuff garnished from your check. Because you're such a slave, they take your money for you to give it. And you ain't got to raise your hand because I know you do. They take your money right out. Your taxes, because you wouldn't pay your taxes before, they take the taxes right out of their account. Gone. What happened? You get a paycheck from your job. They already done took it out. If that ain't slavery, I don't know what is. But as Christians, we still have to deal with that. Yes, ma'am.
And what I'm finding out is humbleness is very important on each side of that, whether you're a master or whether you're under somebody. Because a lot of times I have been blessed to be in leadership roles and be able to lead people. But also, you have those roles, as they said, where you're under someone. And sometimes that's hard to make that switch from, you know, being in charge. Now you have to listen to somebody else and subject yourself to these people. But when you realize that God is in control of everything, that it's really not about you in the first place or what they're doing, then that really helps. And just being grateful for all these things. So many times we complain about the people who are in charge of us. So many times we complain about our bosses or those authority figures. But even, I think, in my worst times, the people that I don't agree with that are in authority over me, when I sit down to actually think about, you know, they did such and such for me, or God helped them to do so and so, or things, it really just changes my mindset. And then going back into those leadership roles, seeing how, okay, I didn't really like this from such and such. How can I make sure that I don't do that to other people? And having that, just Jesus working in you and looking at Jesus as that role model, as he's the Lord of our lives, and that we should follow him as a good master / follower, then that just really makes a difference.
I just want to say this, since God, since I, since those, when we're not around people, and I'm saying this out at my home, right? We had one of this animal person who we treated right. We had a dog, 5 years old, but old better. Two things he didn't like. His name was Black. He wanted to call Black. If you call him poor puppy, he gets mad, whistle come all up, or if you throw water on him. He had that kind of respect. He wanted you to respect him as a dog. One day, when I went around, I said, poor puppy, he just grabbed him by my arm. He didn't bite him, but he let him know that he was back to that. Well, if you're a person, you're God to hide this world. We're not supposed to mistreat people. It's not good. It's not supposed to mistreat animals. I just brought that out. His name was Black, and when we was out in the field, if there was a snake out there, he'd find him before we did. And he'd grab him, he'd wreck the hill, and he'd swing back to his very back, and he'd just take him loose. He would cover up and take care of us. He liked us real good, but no call, for that was embarrassing to him. What positions that we were in as people, being around other people, because some people are feeling even worse than others. So I guess we just have to be careful because God sits high, He sees all of what we do when we're not around people and when we're around people. That was all I just wanted to say because that dog stood out in my life.
I know for me, my job, I don't say I'm a slave, but
You are.
I am a slave of my job. I'm the youngest
even though you're under, be an example of Christ. Final hands. I want to make sure I got the hands. Yes, sir.
What about those people that you come in contact with, actually work with, that does not adhere to a plan or, you know, remark or carrying yourself in a Christian way, and people just defy you and they deny? Because you run into that with, you know, some employees that you might hire, some people that you meet, that you customers you have to deal with, and these people have no respect for our God. And it's a tough thing to deal with them, because a lot of times you have to deal with them from a level of what their mentality is. You have to approach them not in a devilish or negative way, but you have to be stern and you have to be straightforward, else you can't get a response. You just don't get a reply. It's just like they're deaf to what you're saying. And they will flip that and manipulate you. And that's the real world that you talk about, that we run into.
And the scriptures never teach that we can't be straightforward.
Exactly.
Tell people, but it does say we've got to be Christians at all times, even when we're dealing with those mean folks. Final hand, yes, sir.
Pastor, I spent over 2 weeks in the military, like I told you. My first day as a private in the Army was horrible. But one mindset I always kept is someday I'm going to be where that guy is. I'm going to wait, I'm going to be there someday. And I ended up being there someday. And my whole time, I used to run my company at the, I don't know, I guess it's totalitarian or something like that. I inflicted a lot of fear into them. They could tell you, you know, they used to tell me, honey, we'll be married to that man. But you know, it's just that that's the way I ran my ship. But at the same time, they noticed the one thing I did, I cared for them. You know, I told them up front, hey, I'm going to send you home before Christmas. You're going to be out of the Army because you did this, that. You're in trouble. But then you know, when they're doing good, I gave them rank. You know, they gave them rank. But that's the whole thing of being a believer. You know, you're supposed to be firm with a person. You know, if I say this, do you think in believing in God, believing in everything, you should have discipline? Yeah, I do too. I believe in discipline. You know, discipline in the military, good for me. But I tell you one thing, I seen some people. Yeah, we were slaves, but I tell you one thing. I've met a whole lot of people around this world. I just don't believe that person's actually suck air just like I did every day. But you know, you're just gonna have to make it. You're just gonna have to, you know, they have to tell them to do this and do that.
It's not easy being a Christian sometimes. We're out of time, but I want to make sure I got all the comments.
I have a twist to all this. Being a nurse, I was in a position where I was over people, but I also did the same work that they did. And because of the walk that I walked in the office, what it was a mother had brought her 12-year-old daughter into our office, and she wanted her to have the Depo shot, which is a contraceptive shot, not because of her cycle or anything like that, because she was sexually active. And I said, hold up, I can't do this, because this is against what I believe. And going to the doctor, who was, you know, the doctors in the office, and they respected me enough to say, yeah, we understand that. You don't have to do this. But it put a situation in the office where the girl couldn't come into the office on lunchtime because I was the fill-in on lunchtime. And sometimes they would come in on lunchtime just to get the shot. So that means we had to say, you can't come at a certain time. But it was because of what, and they respected me for that because, you know, somebody else could give her the shot. But they respected me because I said, I can't do this. Everybody else in the office did it, but I couldn't do it.
That's a good point. As a slave of your company,
yeah,
they respected something that went against your conscience and didn't make you do it or fire you because
right.
you didn't do it. And that's what we're talking about, Christ working in us. Final hand, I want to make sure I got everybody. All right, study ahead on next time. We're getting ready into another touchy topic, money. This actually is connected to the slavery issue too. So we're going to make that transition on next time. Next time will be 2 weeks from now. Next Wednesday we will be in our youth revival. I encourage you to come. Neil Hatfield is coming. Evangelist Neil Hatfield.